Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, sand-swept stroll through the entire life of Mansa Musa, emperor, pilgrim builder of golden cities, and man responsible for one of history's most economically confusing road trips. This is the kind of tale where wealth pours like warm honey, camels move at the pace of a bedtime yawn, and even royal decrees are whispered like bedtime secrets. You start in West Africa. Not in a bustling capital or palace, but in the middle of a dust-laced village where a boy squints into the sun, barefoot and half asleep under a baobab tree. This is young Musa. No throne yet. No embroidered robes. Just sand between his toes and the distant scent of millet porridge rising with the heat. You probably won't survive this era, by the way. Between the walking distances, the heat stroke potential, and the likelihood of being recruited to carry something heavy for someone far more important, your modern legs wouldn't last the week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing who's up late with me around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch into the dry heat of the Sahel, a landscape that doesn't shout, it shimmers. The trees are stubborn, the birds quiet. You move slowly because that's what the land demands. And somewhere in this haze, a young boy is learning to do the same. He's not a prince yet. He's just Musa, son of someone respected, part of a large extended family in the Malian Empire's growing embrace. He listens. A lot. His grandfather tells him tales of rivers that move like dragons. Traders pass through and drop names like Cairo, Mecca to Gaza, with salt clinging to their clothes and stories too long to finish before the fire dies out. Musa listens with wide eyes and a slightly furrowed brow, his mind catching on the shapes of places he's never seen. He watches camels, not rides them, just watches. The way they fold into the dust like tents collapsing. The way their knees bend in two directions. The way they seem to know things before the men leading them do. The town he grows up in is not small, but it's not grand either. It has shade, noise, laughter, and long silences between tasks. Musa learns how to walk slowly and think quickly. His chores are humble. Sometimes he helps draw water from the well. Sometimes he follows older cousins to market and carries baskets back. Occasionally, he's allowed to sit near the scholars who come through and speak in languages he doesn't yet know but wants to. He notices things. That's important. The Malian Empire is wide even now when he's still barely taller than a donkey's ear. It stretches from forest edges to the edge of sand itself. Gold is pulled from the rivers like wet fire. Salt glints like snow in the market. The empire hums with trade, but it hums quietly, as if not wanting to wake something. At night, he lies on a mat beneath the stars. No ceiling, just cosmos. The Milky Way sprawls like a spilled cloth across the black. He doesn't count them. He listens instead to the wind, to snoring camels, to drums from a far-off celebration. And somewhere deep in his sleepy chest, the feeling of something bigger begins to stir. Historians still argue whether Musa was born into wealth or rose to it by proximity. Some say his family was close to the ruling line. Others say he was chosen from a noble but distant branch, plucked, positioned, and prepared over time. What's more certain is this: he grew up in a place where wealth wasn't hoarded. It was woven into life. Gold was used for ornament, yes, but it was also traded like grain, gifted like greetings. Not everyone had it, but everyone understood it. Musa was taught to respect it, not fear it. He learned early that wealth was not what you had, but what you used. to build, to feed, to welcome, or to move mountains, preferably slowly. There's a moment you pause on young Musa, watching his mother embroider cloth with fine golden thread. She doesn't speak as she works. The needle moves steadily, confidently. He asks her once, "Why use gold on cloth?" She replies without looking up. "So the cloth remembers." That sticks with him. As the sky lightens, you see him begin to grow. A little taller, a little quieter, his walk steadier, his questions sharper. He watches the traders more closely now, the way they measure barter bow. He notices which roads are busy and which grow quiet. He starts to see the patterns, and though he doesn't yet know what it means, he begins to dream of building something vast, beautiful, and stitched together with more than gold. Something that remembers. You stretch again, beneath the West African sun. The sky still dusty blue, the air so dry it seems to hum. Musa is older now, no longer the wide-eyed boy trailing behind market baskets, but not quite the man history will marvel over. He walks with purpose, but with that same old habit of watching more than speaking. His world is still Mali, vast and golden. But now his teachers are changing. You follow him into a long, low building shaded with palm thatch. It smells faintly of parchment and charcoal ink. This is one of the small learning halls built beside a mosque that leans slightly to one side as if it's drowsy from years of heat. Inside, scholars sit cross-legged in soft, shifting pools of sunlight, reciting lines from old texts. Some are religious, some are legal, some are just lists, names of plants, stars, ancestors. Musa listens. He learns by listening. It's not a loud education. No chalkboards, no raised hands, just murmurs, occasional corrections, and long stretches of silence where thought pools like cool water. He practices Arabic slowly, at first his lips stumbling on unfamiliar consonants. He recites verses, copies proverbs. He studies the Quran, yes, but also trade routes, rainfall cycles, dynasties far across the desert. He learns that gold isn't rare, trust is. And he learns that in Mali, people trust those who understand stories. One elder leans close and tells him, "A ruler who cannot listen is just a man shouting in a big room." Musa remembers that. Years later, he'll repeat it. There's an evening ritual he enjoys sitting on the roof with two older students watching the stars blink awake. One of them jokes that the stars are ancient camels crossing a sky of indigo sand. Musa laughs but then grows quiet. He whispers, "Maybe they're maps." Historians still argue whether Musa was truly book-learned or simply well-counseled. There's no university diploma in his biography. But what is known is that he surrounded himself with teachers and kept them close long after he could have dismissed them. Knowledge was never decoration to him. It was scaffolding. You walk with him one day through the market, not to shop, but to observe. He notes which goods are weighed twice, which merchants give uneven change, which children sit closest to the storytellers. These things matter. He also notices patterns in speech. The way certain elders speak in riddles while others recite lineages like drum beats. He realizes that authority here doesn't come from volume, but from rhythm. One day, a trader from Cairo arrives with salt incense and a scroll no one can read. Musa persuades him to explain its contents, sitting with him long into the evening. It's a land survey of all things crude, overly confident, and laughably inaccurate. But to Musa, it's treasure. It's proof that people far away are trying to measure the world. He likes that idea. Later you find him squatting beside a charcoal map drawn into the dirt by a visiting traveler. Rivers curve like lazy snakes. Cities dot the edges like freckles. It's messy, sure, but Musa watches it being drawn as if it were a prophecy. He doesn't interrupt, but you can tell he's filing every squiggle away. Not all of his learning happens on mats or under palm shade. Some of it happens on horseback slowly across the flatlands. You join him on one such journey, maybe a visit to an uncle's estate, maybe just a long errand. He rides without armor, without gold, just a pouch of dried dates and a worn cloak. His eyes never stop moving. He sees how the roads change texture with the seasons. He notices how camels behave differently when the wind shifts. He learns how to judge distance, not in miles, but in songs sung to mark time between wells. He learns slowly how to be in this land, not just walk through it. There's a moment that lingers with you. Musa standing at the edge of the Niger River, watching fishermen pull in a heavy net. The water sparkles like a spilled treasure chest. He doesn't speak. He just kneels, runs a hand through the current, and whispers something to himself. You don't catch. Later, someone says he asked the river if it remembered him. That kind of thinking becomes more common with him. He starts speaking to landscapes as if they're old friends. Not for show, just because. He learns to walk with elders and match their pace, even if it's frustratingly slow. He listens to camel herders, who rarely speak to blacksmiths, who seem to hum more than talk to weavers, who tell stories in color patterns. By now, he's a young man with a quiet confidence, a decent memory, and somehow an uncanny sense of direction. Even when the wind kicks up the dust and makes the sky look like parchment, Musa never gets lost. Historians speculate this talent might have come from his early exposure to travelers and trade caravans. Or perhaps it was something less logical, an internal compass tied to his sense of purpose. Whatever it is, it grows stronger. And so does he. You see it in his posture. The way people start deferring to him without being asked. The way he's offered the first cup of tea in more and more households. The way when a debate starts over land or cattle or whether a well has gone bitter, everyone just looks at Musa. And he doesn't rush. He waits, listens, then speaks slowly. It's the kind of patience that you realize too late you're falling asleep just listening to. The dust rises gently from the hooves of a passing caravan, curling up into the morning air, like warm breath from the earth itself. You walk slowly now, because that's what the land still asks of you. And beside you, Mansa Musa. Though he's not Mansa yet, rides at a steady pace, eyes half-lidded, but always watching. He's on a quiet mission today. Not a conquest, not a royal tour. Just a visit to the court to observe, to sit in the second or third row, and learn how power moves when it doesn't shout. Welcome to the slow, sand-colored machinery of the empire in waiting. The Mali Empire at this time is not crumbling, nor is it at its peak. It is humming like a lion resting in the heat, still powerful, still regal, but letting its muscles slack a little just for now. The emperor on the throne is Abu Bakr II, or at least that's who many believe was ruling at this time. There's debate, of course. Historians still argue whether Musa directly succeeded Abu Bakr, or someone else in a tangled line of cousins and half-brothers. But the details like the wind shift, depending on whose scroll you trust. What is certain is that Musa wasn't always supposed to be emperor. He was a deputy, or perhaps a steward. The term used is deputy of the king, a sort of trusted placeholder. You're told this appointment came when the emperor decided to do something unusual. He left, not for a month, not for a border inspection, for the ocean. Abu Bakr II, you see, had a strange and powerful curiosity about what lay west of West Africa. He allegedly launched an enormous expedition, hundreds of ships filled with men and goods and dreams, and disappeared into the Atlantic. Some say he died at sea. Others whisper that he reached a far-off land and never returned. Either way, someone had to manage the empire in his absence. That someone, Musa. Imagine that, being handed the keys to a gold-strewn empire because your boss got wanderlust and a fleet. You travel with Musa as he arrives in Niani, the imperial capital. It's not a city of marble and columns, but of tall, mud brick buildings, flowing cloth awnings, shaded courtyards, and the constant soft shuffle of sandals on dust. The palace complex hums with courtiers, scribes, messengers, and elders sitting beneath neem trees murmuring about rainfall. You're shown the administrative court, not a courtroom, but a space where decisions are made. Walls lined with ledgers, scrolls, and ceremonial spears. Men sit in half circles on woven mats. A griot recites records aloud, while a scribe marks changes on palm leaves with ink thick as syrup. Musa sits at the edge, at first polite, cautious. He speaks only when spoken to, but over time his questions begin to stick. Why does this region pay twice the tax? Why are the salt prices rising before the rains? Why hasn't that road been repaired if it's on the copper route? He doesn't accuse. He just asks. And slowly those questions make ripples. He walks the palace garden after meetings, often alone. Guards watch from a distance, used to his routines. You follow quietly, noting how he touches tree trunks as he passes them, marking the way maybe, or simply grounding himself. He keeps a private chamber near the treasury. It's simple. One woven mat, a low writing table, and a box of small rocks labeled by place names. He picks one up before sleeping each night. No one knows why. Maybe just to remember how wide the world is. As months pass, his responsibilities increase. The empire surprisingly doesn't fall apart. In fact, under Musa's quiet hand, it stabilizes. Caravan routes are protected. Scholars feel heard. Grain is stored more efficiently. Even the scribes write with slightly straighter lines. But no one calls him emperor. Not yet. There's a strange weight in this in-between space. He has power, but not a crown. Influence, but no ceremony. He walks through the city like a shadow in daylight, noticed, respected, but not fully known. Then, one dusty morning, a rider arrives from the coast. No return fleet. No emperor. Just silence. It's unclear how the decision is made exactly. Whether a council voted or the people murmured enough times for it to become real. But by the end of that moon cycle, the word spreads. Musa is Mansa now. There's no coronation with trumpets or feathered fans. No gold cloak draped in theatrical arcs. Just a simple announcement, a new seating position at court, and a shift in how people tilt their heads when they greet him. You'd think the change would be jarring, but for Musa it feels almost inevitable. Like the land was guiding him here all along, one grain of sand at a time. And so, in the softest revolution you've ever seen, a deputy becomes a sovereign. Not by blood feud or battle, but by being the one who listened the longest. The air feels heavier now, not from weather, but from expectation. You follow Mansa Musa through the streets of Niani, the capital of Mali, as he walks slowly. Not because he's tired, because he knows everyone is watching, and he's still getting used to being a symbol. This is stepping into power, but with a whisper instead of a fanfare. His robes are slightly finer than before. Not ostentatious, just enough embroidery to suggest that decisions now follow him around like dust on a breeze. His walk is the same, steady, deliberate. a rhythm learned from watching rivers, not from marching armies. People bow now, not deeply, not theatrically, but just enough to show they've noticed. And more importantly, they remember. You trail him into the palace courtyard, where he meets with the council of elders. They sit on mats in a half circle, as they always have, but now Musa's mat is at the center. He still listens more than he speaks. But when he does speak, it comes with the weight of consequence. They ask about water access in the north. He asks how many families depend on the disputed well. They ask about bandits near the copper trail. He asks how far the patrols were walking before they tired. He's not ignoring the issues. He's stretching the perspective. This is how he rules through detail. Historians still argue whether Musa was chosen for this role out of political necessity or sheer competence. Either way, no one challenges the decision now. Mali needed stability, and Musa was quiet enough to offer it without cracking the floorboards. But power is a strange beast. One day, he walks past the treasury, a large mud brick building, surrounded by guards who shift their spears more nervously when he approaches now. Inside are slabs of raw gold sacks of cowrie shells, ledgers written in 3 languages. He nods politely, then moves on. Wealth doesn't impress him exactly. It fascinates him. Not for what it can buy, but for what it can build. He meets with architects who describe mosques with timber columns and open-air designs. He sketches ideas on old ledgers in the margins of trade contracts. No one knows what he's drawing. They just see lines, arches, domes that may one day exist. You accompany him to a village near the Niger River. They bring him gifts, calabashes of honey, finely woven cloth, and a carved stool. He thanks them, of course. But he spends most of the visit talking to the farmers, asking about the new irrigation ditch, watching how millet grows on uneven ground. Someone jokes that he should have been a farmer. He doesn't disagree. He visits the salt mines at Tagaza. The work is harsh. Men carve massive white blocks from the earth like cutting ice from a desert. He doesn't speak often here, just watches, takes notes, talks to the foreman about trade weights and how long camels can carry the slabs without breaking stride. He isn't ruling from a throne. He's ruling from the field. One morning he requests the census reports, not just population, but occupations. He wants to know how many leather workers, scribes, weavers, potters, builders, and poets are under his care. A scribe looks confused. "Poets, your majesty." "Yes," Musa says. "They're the only ones who write the truth while pretending they're lying. You like that." Another day, a trader from the Maghreb offers rare spices and metalwork, hoping to earn favor. Musa accepts the gift, then asks if the man would be willing to stay and teach others the crafting techniques. The man is stunned. Stay in Mali. He stays. The palace begins to change subtly. More scrolls arrive, more scholars, more visitors from far-off lands. Some come for trade, some for curiosity, some because they heard of a ruler who doesn't yell but remembers what you said last week about goat hide prices. Musa commissions a group of scribes to begin collecting local histories, oral accounts, lineages, proverbs. He doesn't want them written for foreigners. He wants them written for Malians who haven't been born yet. One scribe writes in the margin, "The king believes time is a book with pages we haven't seen." You don't rush through this part. There's nothing flashy. No declarations. Just quiet policies. Tiny shifts. He reduces some taxes for desert communities, but increases support for traders who agree to take scribes along on their journeys. He organizes repair teams for the older roads, especially the ones leading to places of study. And then one sunset, he stands on the palace balcony. Not grand, just high enough to see the horizon, and murmurs something to the wind. You lean in. He says gold is heavy, but ideas move faster. Later, when asked what he wants to be remembered for, he doesn't mention wealth, or buildings, or even pilgrimage. He says, I want my people to read what their grandparents dreamed. That night, the stars seem a little closer, the sand a little softer, and the story a little more real. The land stretches before you, like a woven mat pulled taut by the sun, flat wide, glimmering with heat. You ride with Mansa Musa now, not as a student or a steward, but as a ruler. He's calmer than most men would be in his position. Less about proclamations, more about gold dust and quiet maps. You're headed out of Niani again, away from the palace's shaded courtyards and soft-spoken courtiers. This time, Musa is journeying deeper into his empire, not for ceremony, but for understanding. For gold. Not for more of it, exactly. Mali has enough gold. In fact, some say the ground beneath your feet practically sweats it. You pass villages where children play with discarded flakes of the stuff too young to grasp its value. You watch traders weigh it in tiny scoops, comparing it to salt grain and fine cloth. Gold in Mali is like steam in a kitchen. Present, constant, faintly miraculous, but not something anyone shouts about. Still, Musa wants to know where it comes from. Not just Tagaza or Bambuk, the famous mines, but the full chain. The smelters, the guards, the silent men who work waist-deep in dust to pull a shine out of dirt. The caravan slows as it approaches one of these sites, a place half swallowed by sand, dotted with tents, furnaces, and the occasional camel that looks more scholar than beast. Musa dismounts slowly, his eyes narrowing as he watches the process. Workers bring him a nugget freshly cooled. It's irregular, jagged the size of a mango pit. He turns it over in his palm. Too soft, he murmurs. It needs alloy. A metalsmith nods, impressed. You've learned, he says. Musa smiles. I've listened. He doesn't stay long. Just long enough to ask about wages, working hours, and how the summer heat affects furnace yields. Then back on the road. You continue with him through the empire's great arteries, ancient trade routes, beaten into the earth by generations of sandaled feet and camel tread. These paths, he tells you, are older than empires. Some were walked before Mali had a name. He pulls out a leather roll one evening by the fire. It's not a scroll. It's a map, hand-drawn, updated with charcoal. You lean over his shoulder. The lines aren't precise, but they feel right. Towns, rivers, borders, and routes, some straight, some curled like sleeping snakes. There's a small X near the southern curve of the Niger. You ask what it means. A town no one talks about, he says, but it trades 3 times the grain of its neighbors. I want to know why. Historians still debate whether Musa created the first formal map network in West Africa. Some believe he kept mental maps more accurate than the parchment ones arriving from the north. Others argue that the scribes he sponsored did the real work. But whatever the case, he knew the land, its textures, its voices, its value. And not just the gold kind. You pause in the market town of Walata, where manuscripts are stacked like loaves and arguments about astronomy outnumber those about taxes. Musa walks through, slowly nodding to scholars inspecting script. He buys 3 books without haggling and tucks them into a leather pouch slung across his chest. He asks the librarian if they'll copy texts for villages farther west. The librarian hesitates. We have little ink. Musa nods. Then we'll trade for more. I'll send salt. Because here's the truth. Musa doesn't just want to rule a rich empire. He wants to link it. And gold is good for that. Not because of what it is, but because of where it goes. You notice how every time he stops in a town, he pays for something construction learning labor with measured gold. Not flung, not heaped. Measured. Enough to show respect. Not enough to tip the world. Well, not yet anyway. Later that week, you meet with a merchant from Africa who shows Musa a strange coin 4 and thick, bearing a script neither of you can read. Musa holds it, gently, rolls it between his fingers, then passes it back. He says, "I'd like to meet the man who minted this." That's how he thinks now. In chains of possibility. Not in wealth for its own sake, but in what it can connect. You ride on. Across dusty flats and under moonless skies. The empire unfolds beneath you like an embroidered cloth, each thread a town, each knot a crossing. You camp beside a salt caravan one night. The traders are cheerful, coated in desert dust. They offer Musa tea and dried figs. He offers them a small pouch of gold dust, carefully measured for the salt they've brought. "No more, no less. You could afford to pay double," you whisper. "Yes," he replies, "which is exactly why I won't." Power to Musa is not in generosity. It's in restraint. That's the difference between being rich and being respected. And so you continue. Slowly, thoughtfully, through river towns where boats are carved from single trees, through plains where grain is stored in thatched silos taller than your head, through mountains where the stars feel closer than the sand. Each mile adds a stitch to his vision. Each village tells a part of the story. And somewhere quietly, Mansa Musa begins to understand that his empire isn't just a place. It's a network. Held together by roads, trade, silence, and gold dust, carried carefully in the folds of a thoughtful man's robe. You wake to the soft clang of wooden bowls and the hiss of water poured over coals. It's still early, still gray, but the royal camp is already stirring. Camels grunt, guards shuffle. Someone is singing a low song about millet harvests. And in the middle of it all, sitting calmly on a woven mat, is Mansa Musa, already dressed, already reading. Today you're not traveling. Today you get a slow, deliberate tour of what it means to run an empire from inside it. Not from the throne, not from the map, but from camels, carpets, and court life. Musa is on home soil again, at least close enough. The court has moved temporarily to a southern estate, one of many used seasonally, depending on the rains. There's no palace here in the marble sense. No statues, no fountains. Just high mud walls, wide shaded courtyards, and silence deep enough to hear flies land. You start in the administrative hall. The room smells like ink and dried lemons. Scribes sit in rows, legs tucked under scrolls unrolling like sleepy snakes. They hum to themselves as they copy ledgers, taxes, grain yields, trade licenses, inventories of imported horses. Musa strolls past them slowly. Occasionally he pauses. "That name is misspelled," he murmurs, pointing to a merchant's name. The scribe looks up, surprised, then nods and begins again. You move on. The carpets in his audience room are thick but worn, frayed in corners soft where elders have sat for years. This is not a room for display. This is where real things happen. Petitioners arrive. A copper trader requests permission to build a second warehouse. Musa asks how many workers it would employ. A fisherman complains that tax collectors keep miscounting his boats. Musa writes something down in a notebook bound with goatskin. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't snap decisions. He asks how many nets, how many weeks, how many people are waiting behind the speaker. The court is not just a room, it's a rhythm. And Musa, he's the drumline you almost don't hear, but somehow everyone keeps time with him. After court, he walks to the stables. Not because he rides often, he prefers walking when possible, but because animals deserve attention. He greets the stable master by name, examines the saddle straps on the youngest camel, and checks the hoof of a new white horse gifted from the house estates. He strokes its neck and murmurs, "You'll need softer sand than this." The horse doesn't respond, but you think it understands. From there, you move to the kitchens. Massive clay ovens, lines of men and women grinding grain, pounding spices, stirring vats with sticks as long as your arm. Today's meal is simple stewed lentils, dried okra, and fresh bread. He tastes a pinch of the lentils, nods approvingly, and tells the cook, "Less salt for the old men at the evening meal." Apparently he's been keeping notes. You pass the textile courtyard where cloth is being dyed. Strips of indigo ochre and deep rust hang like banners of sleep. Musa fingers a bolt of cotton, then gestures to one of the weavers. This would make a fine robe for the scholar from Gao. The man bows slightly, not because he has to, but because he's proud to be noticed. And now comes your favorite part, the treasury. It's not a vault, not exactly. More like a series of nested rooms, each one quieter than the last. Guards at every door, eyes sharp but posture relaxed. Inside piles of gold. Not coins, but nuggets, ingots, flakes, and dust. Stored in clay jars. Stacked in bowls. Hidden in silk bags tied with braided cords. And yet Musa doesn't stare at the gold like a dragon counting treasure. He lifts a small ingot, turns it in the light, and says, "This came from Bambuk. Good earth there. Harder to dig. Makes the metal more honest." You ask him once, "What's the most valuable thing in this room?" He points to a corner where nothing sits. "The spot we left empty," he says, "to remind ourselves that wanting more makes poor kings." You don't know what to say to that. Later in the library, Musa reclines on a cushion surrounded by scholars, debating astronomy script reform and camel domestication. He listens, only occasionally chiming in. One scholar argues that stars predict rainfall. Another claims they influence dreams. Musa chuckles and says, "Maybe they just like to watch us argue." You learn that he funds several manuscript copyists out of his personal wealth. Not just in Niani, but in Janewalata, even further afield. A book read by one is worth gold, he says. A book copied for 10 is worth a mosque. That reminds him. He steps out into the courtyard and sketches something in the dirt. Arches pillars, a place for prayer. "This will be built here," he says, "but simpler than the one in Gao. I want it to breathe." That night, you sit with him by a low fire. He drinks tea, sweet enough to stop time. He asks you if you noticed the new linen used for the scribes' robes. You didn't. He smiles. It's softer. They sit for hours. Comfort helps accuracy. Everything is deliberate. Nothing is random. And still, he never hurries. One scribe passes by, worried he's late for a meeting. Musa waves him off. "Time is a carpet," he says. "We fold it when we're ready to walk." You stare into the fire a little longer. He's right. The sky above Timbuktu is that perfect chalky blue, the kind that looks painted on by a sleepy hand. The wind stirs lightly through the alleyways, rustling papyrus scrolls and lifting the corners of shaded canopies. Today you follow Mansa Musa, not as a ruler overseeing logistics or balancing taxes, but as a host, a patron, a man on a personal mission to make sure books are as plentiful as bricks. Welcome to the world of scholars and soft pillows. Timbuktu isn't grand in the way outsiders might expect. There are no gold walls or marble arches. The buildings here rise from the earth in soft, sun-baked adobe, simple, elegant, cool to the touch. But the real treasure doesn't live in stone. It lives in thought. You enter the Sankore district where scholars sit under canopied porches, reading, writing, and debating in voices barely louder than a breeze. Mansa Musa moves quietly among them, not as a king above them, but as a steward beside them. He has just helped finance a new wing of the library here. Nothing extravagant, just more room, more tables, a few shelves for rare manuscripts copied from as far as Cairo and Damascus. The paper isn't cheap, neither is the ink, but Musa funds it willingly, happily even. You watch as he sits cross-legged beside a scribe, watching the man trace Arabic letters with deliberate looping care. The scribe pauses, rubs his forehead, then leans back against a pillow stuffed with millet husks. "Too hot for writing," he murmurs. Musa chuckles, then copies slower. And so he does. You are led through the halls of Sankore University, past alcoves where students nap with scrolls on their chests, and professors scribble corrections into the margins of old poetry. One young scholar unrolls a scroll that's easily 10 feet long, an entire genealogical history of Songhai nobility, written in ink so fine it looks like spider thread. Musa leans in to inspect a particular name. "Your ancestors were stubborn," he says. The student grins. "So are their sons." Musa laughs. It's not all manuscripts and moon poems, though. You join him for a slow walk through the outdoor debating circle, a sunken courtyard where students, teachers, and occasional visiting philosophers sit in the sand and argue. Gently. Always. Gently. Today's topic: should rulers pursue knowledge or just fund those who already have it? You glance at Musa. He just smiles and says nothing. Historians still argue how much Musa actually read. Was he a scholar himself? A translator? Or simply a sponsor, with good taste in academics? What's agreed upon is this: he turned cities into libraries, scribes into celebrities, and learning into a kind of national art form. He believed books should travel faster than rumors. Later that day, you're with him as he reviews a shipment of scrolls from Cairo. They arrive wrapped in cloth, the corners tied with dyed leather cords. One is a commentary on Ibn Khaldun. Another is a study of eclipses written by a Berber astrologer. One is simply titled, "On Patience and Wool." He insists they all be copied before sunset. The scribes sigh. He brings them more tea. You notice how many of these scholars live well simple, but not sparse. Musa ensures they have food shade, comfortable mats, and enough privacy to argue about metaphysics without interruption. In the evenings, the courtyard of the Scholars' Lodge glows with oil lamps. Scrolls are read aloud. Questions are asked with such gentleness they feel like lullabies. And Musa sits quietly on a low stool, sipping sweetened milk, listening. You'd think he'd be restless here, no armies to command, no gold to count. But he seems more relaxed than ever. He says, "A nation that remembers only its kings forgets itself." You pause at that. Then he adds, "But a nation that remembers its teachers, that nation grows taller each year." There's a small moment that stays with you. A child, maybe 7 or 8, brings Musa a folded bit of papyrus. On it is a drawing crude, childish, but unmistakably a mosque. Tall towers, domed roof doors. Big enough for dreams. Musa unfolds it slowly, studies it, then says, "I will build this someday." The child looks up. "You will. Maybe not this exact one," he says, "but something it will grow into." You notice that he tucks the paper into his sleeve pocket. Not as a keepsake, as a blueprint. Before bed that night, he visits the library one last time. The lamps are low. The scrolls are stacked neatly for tomorrow's debates. But Musa doesn't touch anything. He just stands in the doorway watching. "You smell that," he whispers. "You sniff. Ink and dust." He smiles. "No. Ambition." You laughed softly. "Smells the same." He nods. That's the trick. As he returns to his chambers, you trail behind him, wondering how many empires ever bothered to build something that could be read, and realizing this might be the first. The sun over Nyani is gentle this morning, filtered through a pale haze of dust and cooking smoke. It feels like a good day to begin something ambitious, something logistically absurd, financially reckless, and spiritually profound. Mansa Musa is sitting cross-legged in the shade of a neem tree, sipping tea and scribbling on a piece of leather parchment. He's listing things: camels, cloth, salt, scribes, sandals. Today is the day you start planning the pilgrimage. The most extravagant, slowest moving, gold-shedding, geography-altering Hajj in recorded history. It begins with a question, of course. Everything with Musa does. He turns to his vizier and asks, "If I walk to Mecca, how many days before my feet forget where they started?" The vizier, to his credit, doesn't blink. He just says, "About 4 months, Your Majesty." Musa nods. "Then we'll need extra shoes." You walk with him through the palace garden as the scope of the plan unfurls. This isn't going to be a simple journey. No small party of a few dozen pilgrims with walking sticks and water skins. Musa is bringing Mali with him. The first version of the list includes 100 camels, 500 servants, 1 ceremonial carpet, 3 chefs, 2 astrologers, 20 griots, 1 physician with strong knees, several gold-carrying donkeys with backup donkeys in case of donkey fatigue. That's just a draft. He meets with traders next, asking about grain supplies, the best time to cross the Niger, and whether Cairo's bread is as soft as the rumors claim. One trader offers a shortcut through an eastern route. Musa politely declines. The long way shows more maps. Historians still debate the exact size of Musa's pilgrimage entourage. Some say hundreds. Others say thousands. A few Arabic chroniclers insist the caravan stretched for miles with 60,000 people each in matching garments. One source claims 80 camels carried 300 pounds of gold each. Even if the numbers were inflated, and let's be honest, they probably were. The fact remains Musa's journey was no quiet retreat. It was a rolling gold-scented city moving across the desert. You're there when he consults the cloth merchants. He selects white robes for the general retinue, green for the imams, deep blue for the scholars. The tailors begin work immediately, surrounded by piles of woven cotton humming as they measure and cut. He insists the banners be hand-painted. The desert is wide, he says. We'll need to leave a trail of color. You help organize the supply lists for the animals. Camel shoes. Yes, those exist or ordered in bulk. Beeswax for hooves. Aloe for sunburnt skin. Dried cactus fiber for saddle cushions. Musa is as concerned with camel comfort as he is with his own. He even arranges a separate caravan ahead of the main one, a sort of mobile advance team. Their job is to prepare towns for his arrival, ensure water is available, and gently warn local leaders. A very shiny guest is on his way. And then, of course, comes the gold. He doesn't just bring gold. He curates it. Rings, nuggets, bars, dust. Some for spending, some for giving. Some he admits with a grin, just to see people's eyebrows rise. But it's not mindless showmanship. Musa's generosity is strategic. He plans to give to the poor in every village, sponsor mosque restorations, and gift scholars and rulers alike. His wealth is a conversation starter, a soft power move stitched in silk. You walk with him one evening as he finalizes the schedule. It's long, very long. Weeks through Mali, weeks across the Sahara, months weaving through Egypt, the Red Sea, the Arabian Peninsula. He doesn't want to rush. There's too much to learn, he says, and I have too much to share. You glance at his travel chest. It contains scrolls of law architecture sketches, translated poetry, and a small, delicately wrapped packet of Timbuktu soil, in case he says, I forget how it smells. His mother, now aged and quiet, comes to bless his journey. She hands him a necklace made of dried baobab seeds. He wears it beneath the folds of his embroidered robe, touching it briefly each morning. The departure day finally arrives. Trumpets know. He doesn't like fanfare. Just drums soft and slow like a heartbeat made of wood. Children throw flower petals. Merchants bow low. One camel kicks at the dust, impatient, already annoyed with the pace. Musa steps onto the road wearing simple sandals and a suncloth wrapped loosely around his head. Behind him, the caravan groans into motion. You follow, marveling at the noise, the scent, the sheer scope of it all. This is not just a pilgrimage. This is Mali moving thoughtfully, generously, and slightly overpacked. And even as the sand begins to rise and the road narrows to a thin, whispering trail between dune and sky, Mansa Musa smiles, pulls a scroll from his sleeve, and begins reading aloud. Not because anyone asked, just because it helps him think. The desert does not care how rich you are. It doesn't blink at gold. It does not bow to titles or slow down for silk-wrapped ankles. The Sahara stretches before you now like an endless sigh, wide, pale, and humming with heat. You and Mansa Musa have begun the longest part of the journey crossing the Sahara, slowly. This isn't the desert you might picture from a postcard or a movie set. There are no sand dunes shaped like soft-serve ice cream cones. This is flat, rocky in places, dusty in others, sand mixed with hard pan earth and jagged stone, and everything moves at the pace of a camel's opinion. The caravan advances like a wave that forgot it's supposed to crash. Camels plod forward, their legs folding and unfolding, in deliberate, vaguely offended rhythm. The air is dry enough to feel sharp when you breathe, and the sun isn't so much hot as insistent, like it's pressing down on your shoulders, just to remind you who's boss. Musa rides near the middle of the column. Not in front, not in back. He likes to be where the whispers gather, where he can hear the complaints of tired servants and the low jokes of guards who've been walking since dawn. Why don't we ride faster? Someone asks once. Because haste offends the sand. Musa replies. It's hard to argue with that logic. The caravan has its own rhythm now. Wake early. Fold the tents. Boil water. Rub aloe into the camel's knees. Break camp. Walk. Rest. Walk. Rest again. Pray. Walk. Complain quietly. Then set up camp again. Evenings are the best part. The heat relents. Tea is brewed. Griots tell long, winding tales under a sky so heavy with stars, it looks like a jeweled ceiling. Musa listens carefully, correcting only when someone forgets the name of an ancient general or misquotes a line of poetry. Then he smiles, leans back on his mat, and says, "Carry on." One night, the camel drivers challenge the scholars to a riddle contest. The camel drivers win 3-2. Musa rewards both teams with dates and roasted chickpeas. Historians still argue whether Musa's pace was a strategic display of control or just a necessity. The Sahara doesn't lend itself to grandeur. You can't rush across it. But you can make it memorable. And Musa does. Every few days, the caravan passes a desert outpost. Small, mud-walled inns built around dry wells, offering dates water, and just enough gossip to keep things lively. At each one, Musa gives gold. Not ostentatiously, just enough to fix a roof, to mend the road, to restock the water skins for the next tired group passing through. At one lonely stop, a child approaches, curious about the camels with golden tassels. Musa kneels, takes off one tassel, and ties it to the boy's wrist. No speech, just a wink. That tassel will probably be buried with the boy someday. And yes, the camels are gilded. Not all of them. But a few have gold thread bridles. A few carry silk-wrapped bundles that glitter when the sun hits them just right. These aren't for show. Well, not just for show. They're symbols. Signs. Mali has arrived, they say, even in the middle of nowhere. Water is precious. So is shade. And Musa ensures both are evenly distributed. He skips the midday meal when food supplies run low. He refuses special treatment except for the one indulgence. He insists on a rolled carpet for afternoon prayers. It's not luxury, he says. It's respect. There are mishaps. One camel runs off in the night, spooked by wind. It is retrieved 2 days later, calm and entirely unapologetic. A scribe loses a scroll to a gust and spends hours trying to recreate it from memory. Musa rewards him with a new inkwell. There is a moment when a sandstorm begins to rise, subtle at first. Just a shifting in the air, a dryness behind your teeth that even water can't erase. Musa orders the tents pitched early. The camels are tied in tight groups. Everyone huddles low. The wind comes like a warning whispered in too many languages at once. It howls. It scratches. It blinds. And yet when it passes, Musa is still reading. Covered in dust, yes, but calm. He brushes sand from the page and murmurs, "The wind wants to write too." You continue. Week by week, the caravan shrinks slightly. Not from failure, but from generosity. Musa leaves gifts behind at every stop. He gives to the poor, to imams, to towns without mosques, to scholars who didn't expect to see gold in their lifetime. He walks sometimes barefoot to remember the ground. You stop at a well that's deeper than most. While water is drawn, Musa sits nearby, sketching a new design for a mosque. It features wide steps, a tall central dome, and room for books at every entrance. When someone asks him if he's designing it for Mecca, he shakes his head. No, he says, for Timbuktu. The more I travel, the more I miss it. As you near the end of the desert stretch, the air begins to change. There are more trees. The soil darkens. And one day, after weeks of sand and silence, you reach the edge of Egypt. But before stepping onto that more fertile land, Musa turns and looks back. Behind him, a line of footprints stretching hundreds of miles. Some his, some from camels, some already blown smooth. He smiles faintly. The desert never forgets, he says. And he's right. Because even if you brushed the trail away with your own hands, the land would remember that a king once crossed it slowly, steadily, and full of gold. The desert is behind you now. Well, most of it. But the dust clings. It's in your sleeves, your sandals, your eyebrows. You've crossed the Sahara, and now you find yourself blinking beneath the palm-lined boulevards of Cairo, the Nile, gliding nearby like a sleepy silver ribbon. You are here to witness gold everywhere. Oops, the part of the journey where Mansa Musa's quiet generosity becomes a full-blown economic disturbance. At first, the arrival in Cairo is gentle, courteous. Musa sends emissaries ahead, as always, to prepare the city's leaders. The Sultan's court receives the news the king of Mali has come, with camels and servants and gold. So much gold. You step with Musa into the city's heart. The caravan enters like a slow-moving mirage. Camels wearing golden bridles, guards wrapped in embroidered cloth, scribes with scrolls tucked under their arms like sleepy owls. Servants walk ahead, scattering rose petals. Not necessary, but lovely. Musa walks at the center. No crown, no parade voice. Just that same soft gaze, as if he's been here before in a dream and is surprised to find the place smaller than expected. He visits the Sultan's court, where he's invited to meet the ruler of Egypt. But there's a protocol problem. Musa refuses to bow. Not out of arrogance, but principle. I bow only to God, he says. The court murmurs. This is awkward, tense. Eventually, a compromise is reached. Musa steps forward, places a hand over his heart, and nods low and slow. The Sultan accepts the gesture. Diplomacy is preserved? Sort of. Historians still debate whether this encounter was tense or perfectly respectful. Some claim it soured relations. Others say it was handled with grace. What's certain is that Musa didn't let protocol ruin his message. That message, Mali, is rich. You walk with him through the markets. He buys spices, books, textiles, horses, architecture scrolls, date paste, perfumed oils. And at every stop he pays in gold. But not just gold, generous gold. He gives more than necessary. Tips extravagantly, donates to the poor, supports mosques, buys so much that the merchants begin raising prices just to match his mood. He laughs at the inflation. Let them dream, he says. Soon the city is buzzing. Gold floods the streets. New buyers appear from nowhere. Beggars become shopkeepers. Prices soar. Currencies wobble. Within weeks, the value of gold across Cairo drops. Not just a little, significantly. You hear a money changer mutter under his breath, "Blessings can be dangerous." It's true. Musa's generosity destabilizes the local economy so thoroughly that the aftershocks are felt for years. Gold becomes common. Markets stutter. Lending slows. The value of the dinar falters. It's the kind of economic ripple effect most rulers would call a disaster. But Musa, he just keeps walking. When someone finally points out the issue, he frowns. Not angry, just disappointed. I meant to lift, he says, not crush. So what does he do? He backtracks. Not physically, financially. On his way out of Cairo, Musa borrows money. Yes, borrows to pull some gold back out of the market and stabilize prices. Imagine that. A king so rich he causes inflation, and then apologizes with a reverse shopping spree. Scholars still argue about this maneuver. Was it symbolic, calculated? A sincere attempt to fix a mess? Probably all three. What's clear is that Musa understood money's weight, not just its shimmer. You follow him to a mosque near the city's edge. He kneels, prays, then donates enough to restore the crumbling walls and fund salaries for the scholars teaching there. His name is etched into a plaque beside the entrance. In the evenings, he meets with Egyptian architects. They unroll scrolls of mosque designs, minarets, arches, carved wood screens. Musa studies each one like a jeweler inspecting a stone. This one, he says, finally pointing to a grand dome with scalloped edges. This one belongs in Gao. He hires 2 architects on the spot. One to design buildings. One to teach others how to do it in Mali. Not gold. Knowledge. That's what he really came to take home. And still the gold continues. He gives to children in the street. To the man who shoed his camel. To the baker who made him smile with date bread shaped like a spiral. You watch him drop a nugget into the man's hand and say, "You've baked joy into flour." You see the baker weeks later. He's opened a second oven. It's not just wealth that's changed this city. It's Musa's way of spending. Measured, thoughtful, wildly excessive, and somehow still deliberate. Before leaving Cairo, he meets again with the Sultan. The court is quieter now, more respectful. Musa bows slightly, this time perhaps a little deeper. He presents gifts. The Sultan responds in kind. There's mutual admiration now. Also relief. Cairo survived. And so you ride on. The Nile gleams behind you. The dust returns. But something feels different. Musa has seen the full reach of his wealth. What it can build. What it can break. And you sense that the second half of the journey toward Mecca will be slower. Quieter. Not in miles, but in mind. Because even a king surrounded by gold sometimes needs to walk humbly. Even if his camels still sparkle. The road east of Cairo curls like a ribbon, drawn slowly across parchment soft sand. Date palms in shy clusters, and the occasional flash of a minaret peeking over the horizon. The Nile is behind you now. Ahead lies Arabia, Mecca, and a kind of reverence that even gold can't outshine. Today you walk alongside Mansa Musa as he enters the holiest phase of his pilgrimage prestige in Cairo, now shifting toward prayer in Mecca. And even though the gold still glimmers in saddlebags and along camel tack, the energy has changed. This is no longer a parade. It's a pilgrimage. You arrive in Medina first. There is no fanfare, no street-wide whispers. The people of this city see royalty often. What impresses them isn't wealth, it's humility. And Musa understands that. He dresses plainly. He walks more. He speaks less. He visits the Prophet's mosque, removes his sandals, bows his head, offers prayers as if no one is watching, even though, of course, everyone is. He donates quietly to scholars, funds repairs to a small school, leaves gifts for orphans, always in odd numbers, because the Quran praises that. You notice something else, too. He writes less. The leather notebook where he once jotted down gold weights and architecture sketches now holds more poetry. Lines in Arabic and Mondé, reflections on patience, on distance, on how a road can teach you things that cities forget. After Medina, the caravan continues, now smaller. Musa has sent many of the more flamboyant camels home. No more golden bridles. No more jeweled saddles. Mecca does not need spectacle, he says. It is spectacle. When he reaches the outskirts of Mecca, he doesn't announce himself. He camps outside for a night, just to look. In the morning he walks. No guards. No banner. Just soft sandals. The scent of frankincense in the air. And his slow footsteps moving toward the great mosque. You walk with him through the towering gates. The noise around you softens. The air feels thick, not with heat, but with something older. Something weightless and enormous at once. He circles the Kaaba with the other pilgrims, indistinguishable from them in his simple white ihram cloth. There's no crown, no introduction. No one tells him where to go or what to say. He bows, touches the black stone gently, then weeps. Not loudly, Not dramatically, just quietly. And for once, even the griots have nothing to say. Historians still argue about how long he stayed in Mecca. Some say weeks, some say longer. Others insist he visited twice. There are gaps in the records, but what's clear is this Musa did not use the Hajj to flaunt power. He used it to learn. He spent his days meeting with scholars discussing law, astronomy, irrigation, and poetry. He funded repairs to a mosque roof, gave food to hundreds of fellow pilgrims, sat with imams and asked them about drought cycles and legal reforms. One scholar he met would later follow him back to Mali, becoming part of the intellectual revival of Timbuktu. Another gave him a manuscript about mosque acoustics, how sound moves through domes and pillars. Musa read it twice, then asked for a third copy to bring home. You find him one evening sitting under a fig tree outside the city, sipping honeyed water. A local child approaches and offers him a flatbread. Musa accepts it with both hands, thanks the child by name, and gives him nothing, just a smile. The child runs off grinning anyway, because here wealth doesn't impress. Kindness does. One morning, Musa sits with a group of pilgrims who have just arrived from Yemen. Their robes are dusty, their sandals falling apart. They look tired. He listens to their story, then quietly gifts them new shoes, a bag of provisions, and funds to stay the week. He tells no one. You only find out because you helped carry the shoes. Later, as he prepares to leave Mecca, he walks once more through the city's narrow streets. People call out blessings. Some recognize him now. Most don't. But Musa doesn't care. He leaves the city with less gold and more notebooks. Fewer camels, but more memories. A heart heavier with reflection, lighter with ego. And then begins the journey home. But not a return, a reimagining. Because everything he saw, every scroll, every scholar, every echo of the muezzin's call has left its mark. He says, "We'll build differently now." You nod, unsure what he means. He continues, not just taller, but wiser. And so with Mecca fading behind him and the Red Sea wind in his robe, Mansa Musa begins to carry something far more valuable than gold ideas. The road winds back now. Not the same one you took eastward, but one filled with new weight, not in gold, but in ideas. Mansa Musa's caravan moves slower than before. Not from fatigue, but reflection. Each step is thoughtful. Each stop is more intentional. This is the return with ideas phase of the journey. You ride alongside him once again as the Red Sea fades behind and the long fingers of the Sahara begin to curl toward the horizon. But this time the luggage feels different. Not heavier, just smarter. The camels now carry not just gifts and supplies, but minds. Scholars, builders, artists, teachers. Some are old men with voices like paper crinkling. Others are young women who learned medicine in Cairo. One is an architect from Andalusia, famous for building courtyards where wind makes music. Another is a linguist who carries dictionaries inside his memory like pressed flowers. Musa, as always, listens more than he speaks. They stop in desert towns where nothing has changed in centuries. Musa sits in tea shops and unrolls sketches of courtyards and minarets, passing them across sticky tables. Locals crowd around not to argue, but to marvel. A few offer to join the return journey just to see what this king will do next. At one rest stop, a camel gets spooked by a scroll that unrolls too suddenly. It bolts. The scroll is recovered, but not before someone accidentally reads a passage on irrigation and murmurs, "Well, we've been doing that wrong for decades." Musa chuckles and makes a note. "Send a copy to Jenne," he says. You ride beside a cart full of manuscripts, some wrapped in leather, some tied with palm thread. You spot titles like On the Foundations of Justice, a treatise on wind direction and its effects on architecture, and one simply called Recipes with Salt. Later that night by the fire, Musa hands out pages to the griots. These are not songs, he says, but they're still worth remembering. One griot squints at a diagram of a mosque's buttress and mutters, "Needs a chorus. Everything does." Musa replies. He now travels with an architect named Ishak, who carries a curved blade not for defense but for sketching shapes in the dirt. You watch as he draws domes and prayer halls at nearly every stop. Musa watches like a boy watching rain for the first time. The architect asks him, "Why me?" "You saw what I couldn't yet picture," Musa says. Scholars still argue whether this architect was the famed Es-Saheli. Some sources say yes. Others suggest he was part of a team. But regardless of name, his influence would become visible across the empire mosques shaped like poems. Mud walls that breathed symmetry, that whispered. Musa's plan isn't just to rebuild cities. It's to reseed them. In Gao, he stops briefly and commissions a library before even asking where the palace is. "Books first," he says. "Palaces can wait." In Jennah, he meets with local builders who use earth and wood like artists use ink. He doesn't replace their techniques. He asks them how he can honor them. The result will one day become the Great Mosque of Jennah, though that's still years away. For now, it lives in sketches, debates, and one architect's dirt drawings beneath an acacia tree. On the road to Niani, Musa writes letters to his advisors. Not commands, invitations. Requests to begin schools, to build better roads, to copy texts not just for libraries but for marketplaces. He says, "What good is knowledge if it waits behind doors?" You pass a caravan heading the other way, traders from the Maghreb. They greet Musa with confusion and awe. One whispers, "That's the king who prays like a man with no shoes." Musa hears him and smiles. One day, you pass through a village that gifted Musa a pot of stew on the outbound journey. He remembers the recipe. "Too much onion," he says fondly. But kindness tastes better than balance. He leaves them a teacher. As the empire's capital comes closer, the pace slows even more. Not from tiredness, but gravity. The kind that comes when you're returning changed. The guards at Niani's southern gate blink when they see the caravan. It's not the gold. It's the people. Teachers, architects, scholars. They trail behind Musa like a school of fish behind a slow-moving whale, graceful and strange. They bring no weapons, just ink. You cross the threshold with him. He pauses, then whispers, "Let's begin, because this return is not an end. It's a blueprint." You wake to the sound of hammers, not harsh, clangy strikes, but soft, rhythmic taps, like someone building a drum out of earth. Outside the palace in Niani, a construction crew is already at work. They move slowly, calmly coated in a fine layer of dust and intention. Today you're walking through the mosques he built. Mansa Musa moves through the scaffolding like a gardener among vines. No hurry, no shouting, just quiet nods, small corrections, and the occasional philosophical question. Should this arch welcome light or hold it? You're at the site of what will become a new mosque, a design inspired by Mecca's grandeur, Cairo's geometry, and Mali's climate. Its foundation is packed earth. Its walls will be made from sun-dried mud bricks, reinforced with timber beams that stick out like ribs. Not for show, for maintenance. This is Sudano-Sahelian architecture, and Musa is helping shape it. The architect Ishak, or Es-Saheli, if you believe the chroniclers, sits nearby with a stick drawing plans into the sand. He adjusts angles, hums to himself, remeasures with a length of knotted string. Musa watches closely. "You've changed the dome again," he says. "It sounded wrong," the architect replies. Musa doesn't argue, just smiles. They're building more than buildings. They're building memory. Each mosque has its own story. Ngao Musa funds a large prayer hall with multiple entrances, one for scholars, one for elders, one for children who ask too many questions. They'll all end up in the same room, he says, but it's nice to honor how they arrive. In Timbuktu, he helps expand the Sankhareh Mosque, not just by adding walls, but by adding purpose. It becomes a university, a community hub, a place where a goat might wander in during prayer and be gently shooed out without scandal. You walk past builders shaping walls by hand. No machines, just rhythm. A mix of earth, water, straw, and patience. The sun bakes the bricks in rows. They look like loaves of bread stacked and steaming. One laborer says, "These walls breathe." Musa nods. "Then let's make sure they whisper kindness." Historians still argue how many buildings Musa funded. Some say dozens. Others say his name became a kind of architectural blessing, spoken aloud when a new wall rose. But everyone agrees his reign left a skyline, not of spires and towers, but of mud that endures. You visit one village where the mosque was built smaller, humbler. The locals insisted it be shaped like the traditional dwellings nearby, so it wouldn't feel foreign. Musa agreed instantly. "God already lives here," he said. "Let's not confuse him with columns. There's poetry in the details." Ceilings are built low to keep in warmth during Harmattan winds. Prayer alcoves curve slightly to improve acoustics. Every building is aligned perfectly to face Mecca, but also considers breeze. A mosque should cool its people while heating their spirit. And every Friday, Musa joins the people, not from a golden balcony, from the floor. He prays with leather sandals, off toes, touching the same mat as a merchant, a shepherd, a boy who can't yet remember all the verses. He funds imams' salaries not with fanfare, but with monthly endowments delivered in sealed baskets wrapped in cotton cloth. He insists each imam spend part of it on students. "I'd rather pay for curiosity than silence," he says. One scholar from the eastern mountains arrives at Jannah and weeps when he sees the mosque. Not for its size, but for its shape. "It looks like it grew here," he whispers. Musa overhears and replies, "It did. You tour a construction site where a second library is being added beside a mosque. The workers are arguing about the size of the reading rooms. One says big rooms invite laziness. The other says small rooms invite elbow fights." Musa listens, then suggests, "Build medium rooms and let the books decide." Later you sit with him as he sketches a dome under starlight. He wonders aloud what it would sound like to read poetry beneath it. He wonders how many birds would nest along the beams. He wonders if hundreds of years from now, someone will repaint the walls and whisper, "This was Musa's." You ask him why he cares so much about the buildings. He replies, "You can rule with words, or you can build with them." You walk together through a nearly completed mosque in a northern town. The call to prayer rings out as the final wall is smoothed. Musa steps inside. The scent of earth and wet clay still lingers. He kneels, not to consecrate it, just to say thank you. To the hands who shaped it, to the people who will use it, to the soil that gave it form, and maybe to God. The wind today carries the scent of wood smoke and something softer, like warm grain or sunlit cloth. You're back in Niani, the capital, but everything feels slower now. Even the birds perch more lazily on the palace walls. The empire still hums, still functions, but something in the air tells you the tempo has changed. This is the end of reign. Mansa Musa sits on a low stool in the shade of his garden wall, peeling a fig and watching the shadows stretch across the red earth. His robes are lighter than before, still fine, still clean, but less ceremonial. His beard has more white in it. His fingers move more gently. You're not the only one who's noticed. The court has grown quieter around him. Ministers take more initiative. Scholars speak a little longer before pausing to see if he'll reply. The architect Ishak now meets with apprentices in the garden, showing them how to trace curved lines without rulers. Musa watches, occasionally comments, but mostly listens. He says, "The empire is large enough now that it doesn't need my voice in every corner." That's the shape I wanted. Still, he remains active. He tours construction sites, though now from a palanquin rather than a horse. He reviews letters from distant governors, makes notes, then hands them off for younger officials to resolve. He reads manuscripts late into the evening, occasionally calling a scribe over to debate a footnote that annoys him. One day, he spends 6 hours reorganizing a shelf of donated scrolls in the palace library. When someone asks why, he says the most dangerous lie is a mislabeled page. Historians still debate exactly when Musa stepped back from daily rule. Some say he retired gradually. Others believe he remained in full control until his final days, managing everything down to the cost of camel feed. But those who walked with him, as you do now, know the truth lies somewhere in the middle. He shifts from power to presence. You join him on walks through the market where merchants now bow lower than ever. He buys fewer things. More often he asks things. Where was this fish caught? Why is this onion smaller than last month's? Has the weaver's daughter had her baby yet? He's not gathering data. He's anchoring himself to the world. One morning, he calls his son to his chamber. A tall young man with thoughtful eyes and a tendency to overpolish his sandals. They sit for a long time. No advisors, no scribes. Just father and son drinking tea and passing a scroll back and forth. You catch fragments. Do not rule by echo. Let scholars disagree near you. It sharpens listening. Gold fades. Kindness is slower, but it stains deeper. When the young man leaves, he looks paler. Not from fear, but from the sudden weight of inheritance. Musa watches him go and says, "He will not be me." That is the first blessing. You spend time with him in the mosque courtyard. He prays more now, longer, slower, but always with the same posture, forehead to earth hands. Quiet eyes closed like doors to a noisy world. One afternoon, he asks to visit the garden. Just the two of you. He walks slowly, leaning on your arm. He points to a tree he planted years ago. It's taller now, its branches shading the edge of the path. He asks, "Did I build well?" You hesitate. Then you say, "Yes," and you left room for more. He nods, satisfied. Not proud, just content. There are rumors now. Whispers in the court. He sleeps longer. He eats less. He forgets names. One day he disappears for hours, found sitting in the mosque barefoot, writing something in the dirt with a stick. A prayer. A poem. A memory. He doesn't say. Eventually the court begins preparing for transition. Slowly. Quietly. Documents are reviewed. Alliances checked. The royal treasury audited for accuracy. Musa oversees none of it. He spends that week under a neem tree with his architect discussing the perfect angle for catching morning light inside a minaret. Then one day, he doesn't rise. He doesn't speak. He just breathes. Then less. Then none. Historians still argue over the exact year of his death. Some say 1332. Others claim it was earlier. A few scrolls even suggest he disappeared into the desert, never truly dying, just walking on. What they agree on is this: his name remained gold long after his body turned to dust. You're there for the burial. No massive procession. No mountain of coins. Just a linen-wrapped body, lowered into the earth beneath the mosque he visited most. The people file past silently. Some press a finger to the soil. Others whisper a verse. One boy lays down a drawing of a mosque, not very accurate, but full of sunlight. And as the last prayers rise into the red sky, you realize this was not the end, just the final page of this scroll. And it's still warm. The sun sets more softly now over Mali, not the fiery blaze of conquest or youth, but a low golden dimness like the final ember in a fire carefully tended. You sit quietly on a hill near Niani, overlooking the city. From here, you can see the rooftops, the mosques, the braided paths leading out like threads pulled from a blanket. This is the last part of the story, the one about footprints in the sand. Mansa Musa is gone. The empire still moves, but slower, cautious, as though everyone is holding their breath a little, trying not to disturb the memory. His son has taken the throne Magan by most accounts. Young, competent learning. The court adjusts. The scribes update titles in their ledgers. The guards still stand at the palace gates. But now and then, one will glance at the garden path and wait half a second longer, half expecting Musa's sandals to appear around the corner. They don't. But his fingerprints linger everywhere. You walk through the mosque courtyards. Children still recite verses seated on mats, faded by sunlight and time. Scholars argue over grammar. A teacher begins a lesson with the phrase, "As our great Mansa once said." The story has already begun to become myth. In Timbuktu, you find a young librarian cataloging scrolls by theme. She pauses over one. "This one's strange," she says. "It's poetry, but it includes a recipe for preserving sandalwood." You smile. Musa's notebook. In Gao, the mosque he funded is still used daily. Its walls breathe in the heat, its beams dotted with nests. A visiting architect runs her hands along the timber and whispers, "Whoever built this cared about quiet." She's not wrong. Historians still argue how long Musa's influence lasted. Some say his successors squandered his legacy. Others say the cultural bloom he sparked continued for generations, reaching all the way to the maps drawn in Europe. He was, after all, the only African ruler to appear on early Catalan charts, seated on a throne of gold, a nugget the size of a grapefruit in one hand, and the faintest smile on his lips. A myth already. But you know the real version, the one who walked slowly, the one who asked more questions than he answered, the one who sketched mosques in the dirt with his finger, then watched the wind erase them without complaint. The gold is mostly gone now, melted, spent, traded, lost. You find a coin here or there bearing his seal, a cracked tile etched with his name. But gold was never the real treasure. The buildings endure. The books remain. The idea that learning is a thing to carry like water, like prayer, still hums in the marketplaces. One night, a traveler arrives in Jenne from the east. He asks an old man, "Did Mansa Musa really give away so much gold that it broke a city?" The old man chuckles. "Yes, but that wasn't his most expensive gift." The traveler leans in. "Then what was?" The man smiles. Time. You leave him as he unwraps a scroll, carefully, reverently, and begins to read. And you realize that in a world where legacies are often tied to monuments or wars or bloodlines, Musa's was made of questions and built in steps. He didn't need to leave carvings on mountains. He left footprints in sand, deliberate, kind, thoughtful, and just deep enough to shape how others walked after him. And now, here you are, still walking that path, still feeling the echo of someone who once whispered to a desert, "Let's go slowly. There's too much to learn." Now, let the sand settle. Let the echo of camel bells soften into your breath. Let the scrolls close gently in your mind. The gold has all been counted, the maps drawn, the lessons passed from voice to voice, folded into prayer, stitched into mud walls that still rise with every morning's warmth. You've walked the length of an empire tonight, followed a man who never shouted to be remembered, who ruled not with fire, but with footsteps. And now you know the quiet kings leave the loudest echoes. Let your thoughts drift like parchment in a warm breeze. Let your shoulders sink as if you've taken off a pack filled with golden dust. Let your breath fall in rhythm with the desert, slow, patient, full of pauses. Somewhere in the distance, the last stars are blinking above Timbuktu. A scroll is being opened. A mosque is catching its first echo of the call to prayer. A student is reciting a line first spoken by a king who listened more than he ruled. And you are resting, safely, deeply, in the shade of memory and moonlight. The road continues, but not tonight. Tonight you sleep, and the empire sleeps with you.